Will Howard actually, in my mind, made the smart play to rush because he got you back into field goal range. But you've got to say, this is your first read. If it's not there, go. My main finger is pointing straight at Jim Knowles.
Well. How the turntables. This is the Rivalry Podcast. I'm Jace.
What does that
JP.
even mean?
Michigan, Ohio State. Your garbage-free sports talk without the tangents from River Radio Ministries and presented by Elevated Integrity Construction. I'm just glad that I'm not the only person who will scream into the void this episode, because that's been real lonely.
It's going to be a half and half. It's going to be. I'd like to think
there will still be some screaming on my part.
I can be pretty rational in defeat, but I do have some things and some people that I want to scream at.
We've got Ohio State, Oregon. We've got Michigan and Illinois. We've got probably some shots at Alabama. Also Ole Miss. Lots of college football to get to. We'll break the ice with a little bit of a wheel route on social media, including YouTube, if you're not watching there, at Rival Pod. And if you want to check out the blog articles, get yourself a t-shirt and support the podcast, rivalpod.com.
Oh, that wheel route was shaky like a Jim Knowles defense. All right, let's go. Is Ryan Day on the hot seat? Now, I want to preface this by saying...
You wrote these questions, by the way.
The second part of this question is supposed to say after the Oregon loss specifically, because I think it kind of is different. It's different if you walked into the season saying, is he on the hot seat? Because I think the obvious answer is yes, because you've got to win the game.
You're saying specifically after this game.
Does it get hotter now that this happens?
And here's what I'm going to encourage us to do when we answer this. I'm going to encourage us to withhold a little bit, because I think we'll get to a lot of this. I don't want to preempt it too much.
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
But it's only a slight yes. And the 10-second reason why is because it's not the Michigan game.
And I think
I've got more thoughts on that, but I'll withhold.
I would agree with that. The only reason, and I've said it on the podcast, you can fact check this. I have adamantly said Ryan Day only loses his job if you lose the Michigan game this year. I think I agree with you. If you lose the Michigan game this year,
I gotta think about that.
If you lose the Michigan game this year, I don't think it matters if you make the playoffs. I think honestly, if you lose the Michigan game, you don't deserve to be in the playoffs. But the thing,
well, at this, I mean, without jumping too far ahead, given that you have a loss on your schedule, a loss to Michigan, and you're probably not going anywhere.
No, especially with how they've looked so far this season. Not that they can't turn it around, and it's still the game.
By the way, for the Michigan fans that are jumping in this, going like, how is he not going after Ryan Day? Like, I've got some Ryan Day notes.
Oh,
okay, hang on.
I have some as well.
I'm saying I don't think the seat got infinitely hotter just because of the outcome of this game. I think
it does. And here's why. I saw this stat and I screenshotted it so I would remember this. And I fact checked it this morning just to be safe. Ryan Day, his record against top 5 opponents. Do you have any guess what that is?
I do, because I have this in my notes. Yeah.
1-7.
That's bad.
1-7 versus top 5 opponents since he's become the head coach in 2019. 1-7. You know what that one top 5 victory is?
Oh, hold on. He became head coach in 19. Top 5 opponent. Is it Clemson?
I think it was either Clemson or what was Notre Dame last year when we played it, or was it Penn State last year?
It might have been Penn State last year.
Because Penn State, were they like 7th last year?
Somebody top 5. We'll fact check this later.
The man doesn't win in big games.
Where's a Paul Hembekides when we need him? Where's Hembo?
I look at 1-7, and it's easy to go into this year, and we'll obviously get more in depth in this as we break down the game from this past weekend. But I look at that record and I go, okay, you can look at his overall stats and say, okay, well, he's barely ever lost a game in the Big Ten. He's got this and this record. Against teams that aren't in the Big Ten, the man just doesn't show up. And we'll get to this. I'll save some of it because we're going to talk it down. But I don't think he was a major reason that they lost this past game. He is a reason. And there are things that we're going to talk about.
There's a lot of reasons.
There's a lot of finger pointing, and there's some people that are pointing the finger at the wrong guy. And
so let's pump the brakes on that for a half second. So I'm going to say no, the seat's not hotter, at least not necessarily. You're saying but I
think it does.
Before we jump to Ohio State, we've got this segment that we mostly for your sake, because it's painful. We're going to get this out of the way. It's called Rutgers to the Rose Bowl, where we just determine how likely it is based on what we call the Sherrone meter. how likely it is that Rutgers goes to the Rose Bowl, and it's based strictly off of vibes.
And the vibes are low.
42 to 7 to Wisconsin.
Yeah, didn't see at home. Who is
not a good team, and also does not have their starting quarterback.
No. Absolutely torched. I knew it was going to be a long day. A lot of their defensive guys for Rutgers that are even remotely competent were gone. Aaron Lewis, one of their best defensive linemen, out early in the game. I knew it was going to be a long day. The offense has been underwhelming outside of Kyle Monangai. The shout-o-meter is very low. I think I had it at still like a 4 last week. It's down to a 2.5.
Is this out of 100?
It's out of 5.
Oh, okay.
So you know what? Sure. The vibes aren't high right now. It wasn't a great sports weekend.
I do not want to spend more time on this podcast talking about Rutgers than we have to.
Yeah, me either.
Is Greg Schiano on the hot seat?
No.
Or is Rutgers? I genuinely mean this in a non-snarky way. Like, Rutgers is just a different level of program from Michigan and Ohio State. So
and that's why I don't think
the expectations aren't as high.
I think, and I forget when he came back to Rutgers, what the year was, but this might be
it's
3
been
or 4. Is it 3 or 4 now?
I think this is year 5.
Year 5?
I think he came in 19 or 20. Regardless, he's been there for
been there for enough time to bring his own guys in, and you've seen the change. I mean, we were losing to Michigan 78-0. Just right before he got there.
You feel like the trajectory is there.
The trajectory is up. I honestly think the defense has the capacity to be a decent defense. The issue that's been the same issue for years now has been the offense just can't throw a forward pass. They can't do anything except run the ball.
What must that feel like?
When you run the ball with Kyle Monangai, despite how great of a player he is, you're easy to figure out. And so teams don't really have to game plan for Ethan Kaliak-Manis and any of their. I mean, there's just not enough firepower.
Usually, when you go into the transfer portal, you go, "All right, we got a quarterback out of the portal. Here we go." In this case, I get Gavin Wimsatt was a struggle, but you go, "We got." Why?
I would argue, though. I think
what do they call him? The Greek rifle or the Greek gunslinger?
He doesn't deserve a nickname at this point.
You know what though? This is tangential. I saw somebody ask the other day why we call olives instead of greases pieces.
Stop it! I heard you say that earlier, and I hated it then. I hate it now.
Let's talk Ohio State, Oregon. Okay, and there is 1,000 different things we could talk about in this game. Here's the one that I want to start with. And again, there's going to be a lot more. Is this going
to be a question for me?
It's going to be a question.
Okay.
Yeah. My question is, because I'm sick of seeing this, so you already know my opinion. Did Jermiah Smith push off or not? Because there's a real clear answer.
For sure. And that's where my argument. Do I think that it was a call you make in that environment? I don't know. It's a 50-50 call. At the end of the day, I hate that it came down to that.
And I think, by the way, I think that's a fair answer. Because if you number one, the only people I've seen going, well, that's not offensive pass interference, are Ohio State fans.
And of course.
The only people. If you're looking at that objectively, there's a difference between hand fighting and shoving off to go get it. And to not call it in that situation also is an outcome of the game. So you either, by calling it or not calling it, it's going to determine the game. Here's the bigger question behind it, and then we'll get into like the actual game itself. The other question I have behind that is, you are already in field goal range. Mm-hmm. Why would you drop back?
So here's the thing.
Why would you not hand the ball off?
Here's the thing. And
I don't get that.
And it's because I'm not going to contradict myself, because I had that same thought game time, but then I rethought to Georgia a few years ago, where that's what they decided to do once they got in there. And that's
at least consistent.
It's the thing that I have griped about with Ryan Day for years now, where he goes in and he gets too conservative and he risks losing. And I'm not confident that Fielding could have hit that at Oregon. I'm just not confident. I've seen the track record, the way the offense had been flowing with Emeka, with even G. Scott having some big catches, the way that Jermiah Smith had been playing. Honestly, Ohio State, when they had the ball and took care of it, moved the ball efficiently. So I wasn't upset with him deciding not to run it. I actually was fine with it.
Because at the end of the day, it's an execution.
I've screamed at him for years now that I want him to be aggressive, because that's where he's lost those big games. Yeah. And so I'm not going to sit here and all of a sudden backpedal because the outcome didn't end the way that I wanted it to.
And I think, by the way, I think that's incredibly consistent, because you have, and I think rightfully so, you have been very critical of the aggressiveness.
And so,
because if he completes that, okay,
which now, if the Jermiah Smith counts,
now nobody's complaining. Right?
No, if Jermiah Smith gets that, which the play call was working, It's not like he was doing jet sweeps or anything stupid.
And
like,
you have a timeout, and you have all that stuff.
And I saw millions of people going, Ryan Day took another timeout home with him. And I'm like, you didn't watch the game, or you just don't know ball, because you're saving that timeout, because if you catch it in bounds, you need to have that to set up the field goal without rushing your team out. It's common sense.
Yeah.
And I don't understand the people that are griping about us taking a timeout in that moment.
Here's where and again, I've not seen the same stuff. This may be what they're referring to, because I would agree with you in that scenario. The thing that is going to get me, and where I'm going to differ from you on the, Ryan Day didn't cost him the game. I agree to an extent. I think there's a lot more blame.
Blaming him totally.
Yeah. Here's the classic thing, and this is what came to my mind. I don't remember where I first saw this one, but do you remember? I'm not talking politics, okay? But do you remember the video or the GIF that went around of Trump at the rally, and the lights come and he goes, "Turn them off, too bright. Get these lights off." That's Ryan Day in big games.
See,
where the light gets too bright, and here's a quintessential example of it. When you get the OPI call on Jermiah Smith, whether it was, you like the call, you don't like the call, it's pass interference. You can't push off. It's a rookie mistake. Once that happens and the ball gets reset, I don't know if Will Howard knew the clock was running.
And that's what
I don't know if Ryan 100%. Day knew the clock was running. That's a huge coaching issue where you go and maybe that's what they're referring to by taking a timeout home, is you go, if your quarterback or your offensive, you as the coach, I'm fired up for you. You as the coach have to know the clock is running. They lost 7. I went back and counted. They lost 7 seconds 100%. On that play. You call the timeout. You get your guy set, because if you still have 21 seconds or whatever it was, I don't even remember how much time, 13, whatever. You've got to call a timeout, and then you have to call an out route, whatever. But you cannot let the clock run down like that.
No, and I think that's where I would agree with you, but I would differ on my choice of where I use that timeout.
And that's fine.
I think either side is correct.
You can't waste 7 seconds like that.
No, and that's where I think you can place blame. I'm gonna be real. I don't think Ryan Day up until that point cost them that game.
I would agree.
I think that is the one blemish. It just happened to be in one of the most pivotal moments of the game. That was really the only blemish Ryan Day had, and that's been the consistent thing that's happened these past several years. Is that one decision that Ryan Day is unprepared for, and you saw the comparison. I mean, Dan Lanning goes out there in the most genius. It's the same thing Kirby Smart did against Georgia. The most genius coach that I've ever seen goes out there, sends an extra man on the field to prevent the long pass.
So I was going to ask this. Do you think? And I'm not trying to interrupt you. Do you think that he absolutely put 12 guys out there on purpose?
You can see him on the sideline, like holding the player, and then all of a sudden sending him out.
That
Genius.
Is brilliant.
Next level, elite.
Brilliant.
Give that man a lifetime contract for that play alone. You see him send him out there so that he could run off the 5-yard penalty, run some time. He knew that the time was going to start when the ball got placed, and he would waste 4 or 5 seconds in that game.
Dare I say, that's a Connor Stallions loophole right there.
Honestly, 4 or 5 seconds in that moment of the game.
Critical.
And he knew that was going to happen. He knew regardless of what happened, he was either going to make Ohio State waste a timeout, which was their last one, or they were going to have to scramble. Genius coaching.
Make sure they cannot throw the ball back in field goal range.
That is where Dan Lanning outcoached Ryan Day. The rest of the game, I thought Ryan Day was fine. I loved the aggressiveness.
I was going to say I thought of you when I was watching the game. I thought the aggressiveness was solid.
He switched flipped the switch and was more aggressive in moments where I thought he needed to be, and he executed. The play calling was fine. I had zero issue with that. To me, where Ohio State lost the game is 3 major things. Well, I'll say 4, and I'll start off with the first one because it seems pretty common sense. Last week on the podcast, we were talking about it was going to be the team that made the first mistake was going to be the one that lost. And that was partially true, but it was really the team that made the last mistake. And I think both teams had moments they didn't capitalize on. Ohio State, and Ohio State fans choose to disagree with me. I love the Buckeyes through and through. It was an interception on the first drive.
Well, and here's
through and through.
And here's where I'll, not even defend Ohio State, but I'll throw a little bit of shade at Dan Lanning because I was doing it from my living room.
Should have reviewed it.
How do you not? And I just number one, that's got to be called from upstairs.
Yeah.
Credit to Ohio State for going quick because that's why you go quick.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a question.
No,
he picked him off.
For sure.
But I'm going to throw a little shade at Dan Lanning there because I'm going, in that situation, What's more valuable? Well, I'm going to keep all 3 of my timeouts early in this game, or a game change. I mean, would have been, right?
Yeah.
This game doesn't come down to that. A game changing, momentum shifting turnover on the first drive from Ohio State. How you don't call a timeout there is beyond me. And if I were an Oregon fan, or if Ohio State lost this game and I'm even Michigan fan looking in going, what are you doing?
Yeah. Unreal. So you have that mistake for Ohio State.
Just had to get that off my chest a little bit here.
Then you don't take care of the ball. You get a stop and you get the ball back up 7-0. Your offense was clicking, and Judkins gets the ball just absolutely ripped away from him like taking candy out of a kid's candy bucket. And he just absolutely gets it stolen. Takes Oregon 2 plays to go 28 yards. Took 43 seconds off the clock. Not tie game because they missed the extra point off a mishandle. But to speak that,
Oregon special teams,
both teams had mistakes. Oregon had that. Then Oregon had the missed field goal. Then you had Ohio State with the fumble. Then you had them on the kickoff, which is another coaching thing. I mean, a genius play call, gutsy play call by Oregon. Credit to them. That's not saying that was a fluke by any means.
See, I don't think he tried to do that.
You don't think so?
I don't think you could do that on purpose. Like maybe he was trying to hit, but I feel like that's an accidental type thing. Like,
I don't know.
So when they lined up, like my big thing was when they lined up. So I was watching with my dad and my brother, which was a lot of fun. Haven't gone to watch a weekend of football with them. Got to do it this weekend. Was awesome. But when they lined up, we were talking about like, well, would you onside kick? And I'm going, I don't think so. If I'm them, I probably just try and squib it into that middle area and go get it. I think that's what he's trying to do. Here's the other kind of side piece though that people forget about that play. The reason why they're in that position was Jordan Hancock took a personal foul penalty on the touchdown. Mm-hmm. And we talked about like, well, can you move it up to try for the 2 points, whatever. That's why the ball's at the 50 or whatever it was. So again, that's not a coaching thing, but there's another lack of discipline, personal foul penalty.
Yeah.
That play never happens without that.
But you look at that, you look at the mistakes.
Man, there's so many, I apologize. There's just so many tangents for this game.
It was the biggest game of the year so far, other than Alabama, Georgia. And there's tons and tons to discuss. It was if you're not a fan of either of those teams, it was a phenomenal watch. What more could you have asked for?
That game delivered everything it was promised.
You have the mistakes from Ohio State. They made the pivotal ones at the end. You had the mental mistake by Howard and the coaching staff. You had the PI on Jermiah Smith. That ruined it.
Yep.
Ohio State doesn't have a PI. They probably get a chance to kick a field goal, and we might be having a different conversation today.
Absolutely.
That's not what cost them the game. It's a reason. Then you look at the coverage by Denzel Burke. And we got some, I got some stuff on Twitter saying I didn't analyze. Here's some analysis for you. Denzel Burke was targeted 8 times. He gave up 8 catches for 179 yards. He also gave up 2 touchdowns, one of which was for 69 yards. Dillon Gabriel had an NFL quarterback rating of 158.3 when targeting Burke. His overall coverage grade was 37.7. That is your number 1 cornerback. Yikes. That is the guy that has been talked about as a first-round pick. And I had a couple of people coming at me on Twitter from the Rivalries account, at RivalPod, if you want to follow, saying that I was being too harsh on him, saying that I wouldn't say that he necessarily gave up a touchdown. Toast. He was burnt toast all night. He needed to be ejected from the toaster oven in the first quarter. Give me Jermaine Matthews at that point. Do something. Give somebody, put Lathan Ransom or Caleb Downs as a backup to him. The guy wasn't, people were catching it. It wasn't like they were just getting crazy contested catches. Dillon Gabriel, hats off to him, dropping dimes. I mean, the passes were phenomenal.
Because they have to be, because Denzel Burke is a good player.
Dillon Gabriel had a game. I mean, he was dropping dimes. He was making plays on his feet. He was throwing stuff through the air. I mean, he showed why he was a huge impact get for the Oregon Ducks. Denzel Burke can't have that kind of game.
No.
If you're going to be a first-round NFL caliber talent, you're going to be the go-to guy at Ohio State. You can't get toasted 8 for 8, 179, 2 touchdowns, and just get dragged.
And I don't think. And I was listening to The Fan this morning on my way in, and I thought they did a good job of this because they asked Joshua Perry, like, would you have pulled Burke for
Jermaine Matthews?
Thank you. Would you have pulled Burke for Jermaine Matthews? And he said no. And I think he's exactly right because you don't. And his reasoning was you don't want to get in his head. And he suggested kind of what you're saying about throw safety help over there.
Give him some help on the back end.
If that's the guy, and again, this is the same it's the same lack of adjustment it's different, but it's the lack of adjustment that I complained about Wink Martindale with. If this guy keeps getting burnt, maybe shift what you're doing. If our guys can't, if it's blitz or bust, maybe you should adjust that. If you're lining guys up 10 yards off, maybe you need to adjust that.
It just
doesn't make sense.
Here's my other thing that cost them this game.
I appreciate it, but it doesn't make sense.
Here's the other thing that, in my opinion, cost them the game. JT and Jack Sawyer. I love those guys.
Disappearing act.
Outside of Penn State, I could not tell you a moment of either of their careers that has stood out.
Yeah.
Both of these guys highly recruited, both of them coming in from the season, and you're thinking, all right, defensive line is going to be set. Jack Sawyer and JTT are going to have phenomenal years. Let's go. Dylan Gabriel's jersey was clean.
Yeah.
Clean. Jack Sawyer against Akron and Western Michigan and those teams is fine. But he's not the defensive end that you used to have in the past with the Bosas and the Chase Youngs, where even against good teams, against good O lines, they were having to double them. If I'm watching that game, I'm not double teaming either of them.
No, because
I'm not intimidated at all. If you've got a good enough line, they're not producing. And I look at this and it's easy to place blame on a number of different things. You can be mad at Will Howard for not sliding. To me, that's a coaching thing. That's not a Will Howard thing. Will Howard, to me, showed that he can lead you to a championship. He had a phenomenal.
I thought he played very well.
He had a great game. He made the right decisions. He didn't have really any risky throws.
The initial deep shot that was picked off was the only throw that I look at and go, honestly, that was a dangerous throw.
But honestly, the tight end should have come up with that.
Also true.
Tight end should have absolutely come out.
Will Howard was not the issue.
I don't have a problem with that. He wasn't the issue at all. The issue is, if you're the coach, you've got to be able to communicate to your player what the time is, what the situation is, and have him prepared.
Well, and you also got to take the timeout so you don't end up in that situation.
You got to anything. None of that is on Will Howard. No. Will Howard actually, in my mind, made the smart play to rush because he got you back into field goal range. But you've got to coach. You got to coach him better and say,
and he's got to get down earlier. Sure.
He's got to get down earlier.
Absolutely.
But you've got to coach him and tell him, hey, if you don't, he held the ball too long and then decided to rush. You've got to say, this is your first read. If it's not there, go.
Yeah.
Or throw it out. He's got to have scenarios in his mind that he can go through. But to me, my main finger is pointing straight at Jim Knowles. This is a man that you brought in to clean up this defense. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, we look elite all year until we go up against the big guys.
Yeah.
You look at Michigan the past 2 years, nothing. You look at Georgia where he got burnt. You look at
so I've got some of the stats that you're referencing here. So, we mentioned Ryan Day being 1-7 against the top 5. Mm-hmm. Here are 4 games for Jim Knowles' defense that they've given
games. I think I saw this.
Yeah, 20. And again, I'm pulling this because I'm going, when we're talking about BIA, best in America, against Akron, but when you play, and again, I will give credit. This was the equivalent, and they played much better than Michigan did in this scenario. This was the equivalent of going up against Texas, okay? This is a massive test for Ohio State. But this happens. They do this every year, if you've seen Ice Age, okay? So 2022, Michigan, Jim Knowles' defense gave up 530 yards.
Yeah.
2022, Georgia, 530 yards. I'm rounding a little bit here. 2023, Michigan, about 340. 2024, Oregon, 500s. In those 4 games, you're looking at roughly 1,900 yards and about 150 points.
Mm-hmm. And this is the thing.
4 games and against 4 of the biggest games on your schedule.
And here's the thing that is...
That's not BIA. That's not elite. That's we can beat up on Michigan State, and then when the lights shine,
when
they're too bright.
Rutgers and Northwestern are in town, dominant. But
amazing.
But and that's the thing that I walked away from Saturday feeling the most disappointed, because I genuinely do still think the talent is there on defense.
It is.
And I ripped on JTT and I ripped on Jack Sawyer. I genuinely do think they're good players, but I don't think they're being coached right.
And if you disappear,
what you talked about with Michigan last week.
And if you disappear in the biggest moments, how does that help?
And I think some of that is scheme. I saw numerous times on Saturday where JTT and Jack Sawyer are playing coverage. I'm sorry.
I wouldn't do that.
Have you seen Jack Sawyer and JTT? Those guys are monsters. They're not covering trash, especially with speedy receivers that Oregon is known for. Hey, Jim Knowles, I could have told you that from the start. And now I'm starting to get ticked.
Well, and
because I'm sitting there watching this and I'm looking at this, and I know people are saying a $20 million roster, and a majority of that was spent on defense.
Yeah.
I mean, the impact transfers you got in Caleb Downs, Jermiah Smith, Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins. I'm sure that took up a chunk of it, but a good portion of
Jeremiah's not transferring it.
Well, not a transfer, but like for recruiting and NIL stuff.
Absolutely.
And so I'm talking about spending stuff for this roster to bolster it. You got Tyleik Williams back. You brought Jack back. You brought Lathan Ransom, Denzel Burke.
You either pulled in from the portal or used NIL to bring back this veteran core of guys who just got exposed on Saturday night.
And I looked up their salaries for the assistant coaches because I'm petty like that. And it was about $11.5 million in just the assistants. Just the assistant coaches and the head coach, which is the most of any Division I school in the NCAA. You're paying your assistant coaches $11.5 million. You're spending $20 million to bring in players to come up with what going into this game was the number one defense in the nation.
Sure.
And that's what you put up. That to me, I don't care about anything else. Say what you want about the decision at the end of the game, the Will Howard, the turnovers, whatever. The game itself fell on the shoulders of the defense, not performing, not getting a stop when they needed to. There were numerous times where it was third down and they bit on a fake that I could have seen coming.
Yep.
One of which was a Dylan Gabriel 20-something yard touchdown run.
Which by the way, I looked at my dad during that and I said, I've been so used to even in the JJ era, so used to watching Michigan run these RPOs where it gets handed off that I couldn't believe that he kept it.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, made guys look like fools.
But he did it numerous times. Yep. And it fooled every single time they bid on it.
You cannot give up 500 yards. And again, it's someone said this, and I apologize that I don't remember the source. So if this was you, thanks. That in an isolated chamber of this game, you can go, it's Oregon, it's not that big a deal. But again, to quote the philosophical film Ice Age, they do this every year.
And I think we can move on to that portion of it because it's not like years past. And I think we talked about this last week going into the game. I don't think we said it on the pod, but we talked about, I've been getting in the headspace here because in years past, this is almost a season killer for the Buckeyes.
For sure.
And now it's not because of the expanded playoffs. So I look at this and I go, okay, well, I got to get out of the mindset of now the season is on the ropes because of this loss. Ohio State's record, I still think, and there's reality. Sure. You got to bring back to reality. This was the number 3 team in the nation.
Yep.
At their place.
Yep.
Under the lights with a phenomenal offense, and you lost by 1 point in a game where you committed the most turnovers. You played super sloppy on defense, and you still had a chance to win it. And so you got to come back to earth at some point and kind of look at that. And while it's not an excuse, it's not me sitting here going, well, Ohio State deserved to win the game. Yeah. You gave yourself a shot. Because
Oregon shot themselves in the foot about half a dozen times, too.
And it's having that mindset of, okay, what's the realistic scenario now? Your toughest games left on your schedule. You have Indiana, who's currently ranked 16.
Yeah.
Which is, I think everybody in America outside of Indiana would say Ohio State's going to win that. You've got Nebraska in a week.
You are currently 25.5 point favorites.
You go, and Nebraska's not, I don't know what Nebraska is other than
it's a 4-score spread. So
they're a school that plays football and has Patrick Mahomes Jr. on their team. But the big one outside of the game, we get that. It's the game always. It's always the game. But yeah, it's November 2nd. It's Penn State. And you look at that and you go, okay, the schedule seems favorable for Ohio State to win out. Penn State's going to be a tough out.
I would think so.
But
you will be favored. I'll put that way. You will be favored in every game.
So you look at that and you go, okay, so there's not a clear chance, but like you're feeling good. You will be multi-score favorites in every game except maybe Penn State, but you will still be favored. And you go into the end and you're going, okay, so we go in with one loss against Oregon on the road. Most likely you're playing them again in the Big Ten Championship in Indy. That's just, in my mind, that's what I'm envisioning. Did I see enough this past Saturday to make me feel confident that if a rematch happens, Ohio State can pull it out? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 1 point game, right?
To me, and we talked about it last week, and it feels kind of like we're just regurgitating the same thing. Well, but I think you play that game 10 times, and it's honestly a 5-5 split.
Probably.
I think it depends on where you play. And so playing on a neutral field is going to be interesting if it ends up happening. But
and that's the one thing that, and this is not directed at you, but I'm going to say this because this is the rivalry, okay? Do you want to know why nobody likes Ohio State fans?
Oh, I could tell you why.
And it's the regurgitation is a good word. The regurgitation over and over again of after the loss was Ohio State, pretending like they were good sports towards Oregon, like good game. See you in Indy. Good game. See you in Indy. Hey, good luck. We'll see you in Indianapolis. Are you kidding me?
I hate that.
Because Penn State's sitting there going, hey, and again, we have said for weeks on the podcast, I think Penn State is the most unimpressive.
Yeah.
Unimpressive 5-0, now 6-0 team in the country. By the way, some strong resilience against USC when they went down. Okay.
On the road too.
So USC is USC, 6-0 team. You have to go to their place to play that game, whether you're favored or not.
Board material.
So to sit there as a fan base, you want to know why Alabama and Ohio State fans are usually the ones that people go, yeah, these are the worst fans in the country, because of stuff like that. Because there's always something. It's like, well, and this wasn't you, but there's always, well, we would have won, but we got a terrible OPI call. Well, we would have won, but we had the flu.
Don't like that.
Oh, well, they had our signs. And there's always some reason why the team that beat you isn't better than you. There's always something. So to come out of this game and go, yeah, well, we'll see you in Indianapolis. Maybe. But I'll tell you what, if you get beat by Penn State, now, by the way, this is a conference game now, right? This isn't a non-conference.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a conference loss. If you lose to Penn State, not only do you now have 2 conference losses, but now Penn State could drop 2 Big Ten games and still have a tiebreaker.
And I think for me, and it's been the talk of the weekend.
That game right there, and I'll say this as well, a loss to Penn State, while I think it would keep you out of the playoff.
Oh, I would agree.
I don't know that it does, but I'll tell you what, it keeps you out of the Big Ten championship. So there's no hope of a bye. It also keeps you out of that 5 spot. So the way that it breaks down is it is likely, let's say Ohio State wins out. Okay. They play Oregon again. Let's say Oregon wins. Oregon gets the bye.
I don't think they make it.
Oh, interesting, isn't it? But let's say, you end up in the 5 spot. Whoever ends up in the 5 spot is playing Navy and then gets to play the 4 seed in Iowa State. That's not a bad position to be in. Okay. There are better positions, but maybe there's not. Yeah, there are worse positions, I should say, like not being in the playoff. Like that's a pretty good position. If you lose to Penn State, you have locked yourself out of the bye. You've locked yourself out of the 5 spot. You are now having to go, if you make the playoff, you're having to go on the road to, I don't know, Georgia, Alabama,
don't love that,
Tennessee. Like, pick your poison here a little bit. Frankly, the way that they're playing right now, you may end up having to go to Clemson. So to sit there and go, we assume we're just going to see you there, is arrogant and ridiculous. Now, you very well may, because I'm still not sure what to make of Penn State, but to assume, we're going to go into Happy Valley and run the table
that's
is
what's
ridiculous.
Frustrating is
and frankly, and I'll say this too, for whatever else Michigan has been this year, you haven't beat Michigan since COVID. Yeah, you're going to be big favorites. You better show up to win that game.
Yeah.
Because the
not
game,
wrong.
Throw the records out in the game.
It never matters.
We've seen this again and again and again and again. Teams good Michigan teams, bad Ohio State teams, real close. Great Ohio State teams, bad Michigan teams, real close. This is the type of stuff I can't deal with.
And I don't like,
Buckeye fans
even as a sports fan, I don't like the juju that brings, because it's like, sure, Ohio State is the most talented to get there to compete against Oregon.
Yeah,
but all it takes is I mean. We've ripped on Penn State, and we're going to continue to rip on Penn State because of who they are. But
let's I will give a little bit of credit. I thought they were dead in the water to USC.
I thought
that was
we
our
were right.
Stupid genius pick.
I thought we were right, and we were going to just comfortably watch, and then they ended up winning.
And USC is USC. USC is probably the best 3-3 team in the country, or whatever they are.
They're not great, but it's a good win.
That's a big boy win for Penn State.
It's a great win for them, and that's never a give me. And so I look at that and I go, to me, and you kind of hit on this already. If you lose to Penn State,
nothing's guaranteed anymore.
If you lose to Penn State, you've got to win out and you've got to win the Big Ten championship. And on the other side of that, if you do win out and you get to the Big Ten championship, you've got to beat Oregon again.
Yeah. You will probably still, I know last week we said, well, if you lose to Oregon twice, you may not get in. You may not. With the number of losses other teams are having, you're probably okay. I think the Penn State game, though, is the one where if you lose that game, you're not going to Indy and you may not make the playoff. It depends. You're at least putting your hopes you are going to need help to get there. You're going to need help to make the playoff, and you will then have to go on the road. And I just don't think Ohio State travels well.
A massive thing that happened this past weekend, and I don't know if they've officially ruled what exactly happened, but Josh Simmons goes down.
He's out.
And
he's gone for the year.
I saw Ryan Day said it most likely that he was out. I hadn't seen it confirmed.
By the way, and this is where we remember, like, this is a fun game. These are college kids. Like, prayers up for Simmons, because that's a horrible thing.
Yeah, and I saw Ryan Day came out and said it doesn't look good. He'll play. I hadn't seen official what happened. I just assumed, but that's a huge loss, a massive loss for that offensive
from a football standpoint.
Yeah,
from I mean, that was the big question mark all season long.
And
you don't have depth there.
No.
So yeah, I mean, we wish him a speedy recovery and all that stuff. A tough loss for Ohio State. The last thing I'll say on that, and then we're gonna do some sponsor reads and go to Michigan here, is I picked 31-30 Oregon.
Did you really? I forgot. I knew we were pretty close.
And I feel real good about a 1-point Oregon win. I think it was 32-31?
32-31.
That's about as close as I'm ever going to be on this podcast. Hey, maybe you feel a little bit like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. You know what you're doing isn't working and you need to transfer in some help. Our friends at Elevated Integrity Construction are the portal to a successful project. Aaron Carroll and his team, they've been doing this a long time. They'll communicate openly and honestly. It will leave you wowed at the finished project, unlike Ole Miss at LSU on Saturday night. Home, church, or business build, go with the folks with integrity in their name. It's elevatedintegrity.com. We're also really excited to be part of the Varsity Network this season, powered by Learfield, and a must-have app for every college football fan. Free to download wherever you get your apps. Enjoy live college football games and podcasts just like this one. Search for the Rivalry Podcast or your school to find tailored content in the Varsity Network app. Mentioned this earlier, but at social media, at RivalPod. At RivalPod on social media, on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, rivalpod.com. You want to read articles, see photos from the games, and support the podcast as well. Whether you want to pick up a RivalPod t-shirt, we've got it branded for both teams, or you just want to give a gift and say, hey, we love what you guys do. We want to support you. We've got some opportunities coming up that we'd love to be able to have budget for. If you want to help out in that way, that would be appreciated. RivalPod.com. Great example would be, we were credentialed to go to Oregon this past weekend, and and let's be honest, budget ain't there. That's a big trip. Mm-hmm. So if you want to support the podcast so that JP can go and suffer all the way back from Oregon to Ohio, honestly, I would come out of pocket for that.
It would have been better than having to watch the Browns on Sunday. So
rivalpod.com. Thank you for your support in that way as well.
Michigan time.
Let's talk about Michigan. Michigan coming off a bye week.
Who would have thought a big game?
Yeah, so they're going to Illinois this weekend, 3:30 slot, which is my least favorite kickoff slot.
The worst time to have a football game.
I have not, and this is just me, I've not enjoyed the games on CBS. I've not enjoyed Big Ten games on CBS. I don't think it sounds right. That's an SEC network. I don't like it. Doesn't matter. No one asked me. Illinois, by the way, going to wear these awful jerseys.
I haven't seen them. What are they? Are they the oranges?
No, this is it's the 100th year of Memorial Stadium and something about.
I'm bored already.
Somebody running Red Grange or whatever, running all over Michigan. You're doing a great job
of explaining it.
It's going to be blue jerseys, and they're going to have these half brown stripe things on it to look old school. And the helmets are going to look like fake leather helmets. It's going to be awful.
I'm glad that I'm at a conference that day and we'll be missing.
It's going to be more awful if Michigan doesn't beat them in those jerseys. Michigan, at time of recording on Monday morning, 1.5 point favorites
against Illinois. Who would have thunk?
Number 22 in the country. Michigan ranked number 24. These two teams are not dissimilar, and I hate that. I hate that a lot.
Maybe I'm more confident today than you are.
Yeah. So Illinois, here's the good for Illinois. If you're an Illinois fan, which I'm sure there's 2 or 3 of them.
Somebody's
in the world.
I am this week.
Luke Altmaier's a pretty good quarterback. He's not at the Miller Moss level. He's not the Will Rogers level.
Is he a pretty good quarterback, or is he just better than 90% of the Illinois quarterbacks in the past?
That might be some of it also.
Juice Williams.
Since Brandon, he is better than Brandon Peters was, the former Michigan transfer.
Is he fine, or is it just we're so used to trash?
No, I think he's a good quarterback. He
is a serviceable, as we've said on the podcast for many other guys.
I mean, are they 5-1 or 6-1?
5-1.
They're a 5-1 football.
Yeah, 5-1.
Whatever. They have one loss on the year, and it's mid-October. Okay. Now the
3 ranked win.
They have beat one team with a winning record, and it was Nebraska. One team.
Didn't they play?
They've played Central Michigan. They played Eastern Illinois, which I think is just made up. I think that's Bishop Sycamore's college program. And then they took overtime and a desperate field goal on Saturday to beat Purdue, who is like statistically one of the worst teams in football. So you scored 50 points, but you gave up 49 to Purdue, you know? So like, I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, they beat Kansas to start on week 2 when Kansas was ranked 19th. They won in overtime.
Do you know what Kansas is ranked? You know what Kansas record is?
But at the time, it was a ranked win.
Cool.
Nebraska at the time was a ranked win. Nebraska is still 5-1.
Nebraska is fine. Kansas is 1-5. So there's just not much going on for Illinois.
Penn State tough.
They played Penn State
on the road.
So again, like this is a team that I don't know what's going to show up, and that's where I'd say that they compare to Michigan because I don't know what's going to show up. You know, I'm watching USC, you know, and Penn State, and I'm watching Michigan having beat USC, going, Michigan's a great football team. Then I flip over to Iowa, Washington, as Iowa hangs 40 points on them, and I go, wow, we are terrible. So I think for both teams, this is a game that the reason it's a 1.5 point spread is because it's a coin flip. And if you're Michigan, you hate it because of, there's name recognition, whatever. These are two teams that they have different strengths. I think Michigan's, you know, I'd like to think Michigan's defense is more talented. It depends on how Wink schemes them. I think Michigan's offense is going to be a lot more balanced with Jack Tuttle, but this is still not going to be a phenomenal offense.
What's your final?
For me, Michigan looks like at this stage, and again, part of the reason why it's like, well, why aren't you diving into this more? Off the bye week, not much has changed that is, you know, able to be analyzed from the Washington game to now. So I don't know what to expect. I think Michigan probably at this stage, without anything else to compare it to, except for the 5 games or whatever they've played, Michigan looks like a team that will win the games they're supposed to and lose the games that they're not supposed to. I'm going to take Michigan.
Okay.
24-20.
We're real close this year.
Because
it's like every pick, every week, I feel like we're right around the same page.
That just seems like Michigan feels like they can, you know, Illinois' defense is, I thought was fine until they gave up 48 or whatever to Purdue.
Yeah, to Purdue.
So I think Michigan can score 24, 25, 27, somewhere in there. And Illinois' offense clearly has some talent, but also Michigan's defense is good, question mark. I mean, 24-20 feels fair.
Here's what I think. So I've got my final scores: 24 Michigan, 21 Illinois.
Okay.
So pretty.
It's actually originally what I had, and I said no. You can't. You will kick 2 field goals.
I think the biggest difference here is I think your defense is way more talented than it's shown, and I think when you look at the Illinois offense, the running game hasn't really been there all year.
Yeah, it's
just not been existent. And so I look at that
and it knock on wood, it won't be on Saturday because for whatever, you know, whatever secondary issues, and I mean that literally, whatever the issues the secondary is having in schemes, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, if he's healthy, Derek Moore, if he's back, you aren't running the ball on them.
No. And so I look at that and I go, okay, well, if you're planning for a defensive scheme for Michigan, you just have to focus on the passing attack. Luke Altmaier doesn't scare me. He is he does a
little bit for me.
He doesn't scare
just because I don't know what to expect.
He doesn't scare me at all. Not to say that he's bad. I think he'll still be fine. He's not a quarterback that I look at and go, he's going to be the one that beats you.
It's not Will Rogers. It's not Miller Moss. It's obviously not Quinn Ewers.
He can make the plays, and those are players that I look at and I go, all right, Will Rogers? I kept wanting to say Levis, but Will Rogers goes out there and I look at him and I go, that's a guy that if you let him loose and let him just sling it around, he's going to beat you. Miller Moss, if you let him do it, he's going to run around and beat you.
Altmaier's probably not that guy.
Altmaier is not in that level to me.
Also doesn't have the receiving core to be there.
And that's the other thing. I think even if he has a good day, Michigan still wins. And so I think for Illinois to come out and actually win this game, they're going to have to get turnovers and they're going to have to get a rushing game going. Both of those will have to happen, and I just don't see both of those happening.
I agree on the rushing game. The turnovers thing, you know, is going to be the big question mark, right? Like it's basic football 101, right? You lose the turnover battle, you probably lose the football game. Not always. You know, you'll see exceptions and outliers. You know, there was it Michigan Washington where Michigan outrushed Washington but lost. You don't see that often, but it happens. I feel, you know, I feel I don't even know if I want to say confident with Jack Tuttle at the helm, but I feel a lot more secure than I do with Alex Orji or
sure.
Because you know what you're going to, I think you know what you're going to get with Jack Tuttle. I don't think you're going to have massive turnover issues. I know you can point at the one sample size from this season and go, well, what about that? The man has now had live reps, has now had a bye week. Like, though, that's the stuff we talked about last week.
Announced.
So Sherrone is, doing his press conference right after we're done doing this, but he's essentially indicated. And by the way, if it's not Jack Tuttle, we riot. I mean, I don't know how
you riot. I overjoy. I rejoice.
And Michigan's still going to be a very run heavy team, but Jack Tuttle is a veteran guy. He's a Cade McNamara type. He's a veteran. You need him to distribute the ball and make defense respect the pass game, even just a little bit to open up the run game. That's what I expect from him. I don't expect massive turnover trouble. This isn't Davis Warren reincarnated the way some guys were acting like it was. I feel more confident that this is going to be a little bit more balanced offense. There's a little bit more pace to it. There's a little bit more upside here. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be phenomenal, but I think it's enough to be able to win you football games. The defense continues to just be the big question mark for me because, again, we beat the horse last episode. Very talented defense being put in impossible situations.
Them and Ohio State have the same exact issue. Identity crisis right now.
So give me 24-20 Michigan, Illinois. And then, the week after that with Michigan State coming to town, we've got a whole host of other things to talk about there. Stupid Genius upset pick of the week. This works pretty simple. Got to be at least 5.5 point underdog for you to pick them. If you get it right, you win however many points the spread was. We were both wrong
this past week. Both picked USC over Penn State.
That close, man.
Honestly, we were looking good. I almost got back-to-back weeks right.
Give me your Stupid Genius upset pick of the week.
My Stupid Genius is currently Nebraska over number 16 Indiana, 6.5 point dogs right now.
I gotta start going first on these.
Is yours the same? Yeah. Give me a chance to get a lead, please.
That's true because I'm beating you by what, a point, half a point,
0.5.
So all I gotta do is identify which stupid pick are you making, and I'll do it. Yeah, and I think for all the reasons we've kind of hinted at, where Rourke is a good quarterback. Indiana's 6-0, man. Mm-hmm. They're 6-0
team. He's in the same thing as Altmaier to me.
See, I don't think so.
I think so.
Is this a team that's going to make the playoff? No. But also, momentum is such a big thing in college football, too. And Indiana's got momentum for the first time since the 50s. I at the same time, though, I think Dylan Raiola is still a really good quarterback.
He's so fun to watch.
And I think Nebraska's backs are against the wall here. I think. The hype was there. You lost the game to Illinois. And you've got this game, and then you've got Ohio State coming in, or you're going to Columbus to play Ohio State. This is a big opportunity for Nebraska. I think they get it done. I never thought I'd be interested in Nebraska Indiana game.
I forget what time slot. I forget what time slot that is.
It's a noon kick.
I'm going to miss it. This is the one weekend I got a work conference all day Saturday. I'm so thankful that I'll at least be home for the Texas Georgia game at night. But
that's going to be fantastic. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Nebraska on this one. I have one trivia question to finish off here because I thought this was fascinating. There are only 2 FBS teams who have not trailed this season. Indiana is one of them. Can you name the other one?
That has not trailed
this season. They are in the top 25.
They are in the BYU?
No.
That's a good guess, though.
The Army Black Knights.
Let's go. Okay, Army and Navy are both ranked in the top 25 right now.
For all the talk about Boise State, and I think in one sense, we all kind of want to see that playoff game play out, right? So again, that's where the 5 spot gets a little tricky, right? We talked about the 5 being a good place to play. Does Ohio State want to play Ashton Genty? I don't think they do. I don't think anybody wants to see Boise State.
I don't want to. I saw a meme actually about him where, because it's spooky season, they said Ashton Genty stands like Michael Myers in the backfield. And it's just
he does.
Him just standing up straight. Just crazy.
But yeah, Army and Navy are both 5-0, 6-0, somewhere in there. They're both undefeated.
6-0, I think.
And listen, I would happily will a Surface Academy into that spot. I just think that'd be for no other reason than wouldn't that be something? And those 2 teams, by the way, they will play each other at the end of the year as they always do. Could Army Navy be one of the top 5 games of the college football season? Probably not, but maybe.
There's a chance.
By the way, for the Notre Dame haters, Army does play Notre Dame in mid-November.
Okay.
So just keep that one circled is all. The last thing I'll say is I almost took Georgia Tech this weekend.
Over
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, okay.
Circle that. So
I wouldn't have hated that.
Just keep an eye on that one because if a Notre Dame team that lost to Northern Illinois
they dominated.
I don't care.
They dominated this past weekend.
If Notre Dame gets in the playoff, once again we riot. There's a lot of rioting.
I'm fine. You know what? I'm about it. I need to blow off some steam.
Hey, go ahead and slide on over to that subscribe button before you run out of time. And follow at RivalPod.com.
The Rivalry is a production of River Radio Ministries. Want live updates from the show? Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RivalPod. To learn how to support the show, shop our merch, and read our blogs, visit RivalPod.com. Make sure to follow us wherever you're listening now. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend so they can listen too.